So let's say I'm going to need to put something against the character's shoulder here. So it could be a rifle stock, it could be just a box that he's holding against his shoulder, it could be something sitting on his shoulder. Maybe it's a medal that he's pinned to his chest or something like that. Whatever it is, we need this box, in this case, to sit against his shoulder right here and follow the shoulder. Now, the problem with this is depending on where you put it, you can't really use any of the controls. If I use the shoulder control here, and let's actually try to sit this perfectly on the shoulder here, so we just get that nice flat connection right here. So right there, it's sitting nice and flat on the shoulder right here. So if I try to constrain this, I'm just going to do a straight constraint right now to the shoulder control, the upper arm control. So upper arm control, then the box. I'm going to go to constrain parent. Now, you never want to do a straight constraint like this. This is just a demo. So if I do this, this is not going to work. That is not where that box should stay. It should be pressed here as they're holding the rifle against their point here or whatever it is. It needs to stay there, not up onto the shoulder here. So that's not going to work. I could try to do it to the clavicle control. So once again, clavicle control, then the box, constrain, parent. Now this is going to be a little closer right here. So that actually works pretty well. So clavicle is a possibility. The problem with the clavicle is that now as I start to move the shoulder and make sure my mouse is on the right screen here, I can start to run into issues right here because his shoulder is now compressing that muscle, essentially the pectoral muscle here, in, but the box isn't reacting to that because the clavicle hasn't moved. So I can move the clavicle here, but if he's adjusting his arm, dang it, that's not going to work either. So how do we do this? Well, there are two types of constraints you can use in a situation like this. So under the constraints menu, what we're going to want to use is either a rivet constraint or a point on poly constraint right here. A point on poly constraint allows you to constrain something directly to a point on the polygon or on a surface. So if I select this object, I'll make it selectable right here. So now I can select the shirt. I'm going to select a vertice right. I want to pick the one that's closest to the center of the box in this case. Let's actually pick this one here. So I'm going to take that vertice. Then I'm going to take the box right here. So let's see, vertex, box, like that. Point on poly. And make sure I turn off or turn on maintain offset so it doesn't snap right there. Now it's going to follow this shoulder perfectly right there. And if I move the arm, it's going to follow that as well right here because it's following that actual point on the shirt, not a random point somewhere else. So wherever that point moves and stretches, it's going to follow. So what I would do is I wouldn't constrain the object to that point there. I would, let's undo this and make sure I undo the constraint. Okay, good. So what I would do is wherever you want to attach something, create a locator. So I'm going to take this locator right here, and I'm going to constrain that to the poly right here. So right there, let's say. So we're going to do a point on poly, and this time I'm going to turn maintain offset off just so it snaps into position. And now, let's just scale this down, it's a little big. We've got this locator right here. Now to make this work a little bit cleaner, I wouldn't want to just directly constrain the object to that locator because now I've just locked it onto that locator. I would create a new locator. So let's create a second locator here. Right there. Let's just reset its rotations. And I'm going to parent that to the main locator right here. So now, wherever this locator goes, the other locator will follow. So if I move this, you'll see they both follow along. Now, I'm going to keep everything separate here, but I would usually bring them a little closer. I'm going to constrain the box to this locator right here. So locator, then box, constrain parent. So now, the first locator is following the vertex on the shoulder. It is locked in place. This locator is following the first locator, but it's parented, so I can actually move this around and animate this. And then the box is following the second locator. It is constrained. So now I can place this box against his shoulder. I can rotate it around. It'll follow along. And if I need to adjust this, I can just put it there and have it follow along. And then let's say this was a rifle, for example. It would be much longer right here. I can now just take that locator and animate it pivoting from here. So as I'm rotating his shoulder, you'll notice it's kind of sticking in place there and it's wiggling around. I can just counteract that animation. Now, if you don't want to counter that animation, if you don't want to have to deal with every shoulder move, he's supposed to be aiming this way. He moves his shoulder and is going whoop, 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 all over the place. That's going to be a pain. What I can do is on the box, I'm just not going to constrain the rotations. I'm going to break this connection here. So right there, I've deleted the constraints on the rotations. Now I can aim the rifle essentially where I want it to be. Let's say right there. As he rotates his shoulder, it just points in that direction. And then I can manually just tweak the rotations to get that perfect line of sight or whatever I want. So that's one way of doing it. The other way you can do it is using a rivet constraint, which is very similar. It just kind of does things in a slightly different way. So rivet constraint. I haven't used rivets in a while, so I think it's, yeah, it's select the object and then the rivet. No, wait. Let's see. I always forget rivets. Rivets are new to Maya 2022 or 2023. Okay, no UV pin node. So I always forget the order of things for rivet. I have to think about it. Yeah, so that's what it is. So a rivet constraint is essentially a point on poly, but it just creates a locator for you. So right here, all I needed to do was select one vertex. I knew there was something weird about it. So it doesn't work like other constraints. What it does is it sets up the constraint for you, the locator and everything. So I'm just going to select this vertex, go rivet, and there you go. It's created a locator that follows that for me right there. Essentially, it's taken a couple of steps out from creating the locator and using the point on poly. And then from there, I can just use that output right here. Now, the bonus with this is that this can actually be moved and animated, and it still follows along, which is really nice. So one or the other, if you're using an older version of Maya, you're going to want to use the point on poly. So yeah, that's pretty much rivet or point on poly. That's going to give you that setup there. So hopefully that helps, and hopefully that answers